So in the bit that I'm going to read, Diana is 17. She's living in London on her own. She's under contract to Rank Studios, and she's dating Anthony Newley, who's a fellow actor with Rank as well. Basically, her flat in Chelsea is party central for her and her mates. She's having a wonderful time, young kids with too much money and too much time on their hands. But she's just landed her first lead role in a film in Diamond City. So she's really excited about that. So this is the bit that I'm going to read for you now. Diamond City was a fantastic opportunity, and Diana knew she shouldn't waste it. Having reached the grand age of 17, she needed to focus on her work and cut back on the parties. At Christmas night 8, Diana spent time with her extended family in Wales, but all she could think about was getting back to her life in London and starting work on Diamond. She knew she also had to take dance lessons. Can. Diana just wished for Christmas to be over. By New Year, she was back in Chelsea and its familiar faces and places. Up the Cross Keys with her friends. It was there that she encountered someone who would become a significant figure in her life. She spotted Michael Cabourn Waterfield across the crowded bar and was instantly attracted to his good looks. His eyes were piercingly beautiful and struck her straight away. She walked across the room to get to know him and found he was gloriously arrogant. She told him about her role in Diamond City, and he countered with a comment about going to Hollywood to star in The Secret Garden. Diana felt deflated. He then turned his back on her to talk to his friends again, leaving her furious. She was not going to put up with such treatment from a man. Later that evening, they were at the same party, and he was the worse for drink. As Diana recalls, we ignored each other studiedly, yet I remained fascinated and still wondered who he was. She spotted him again a number of times over the next few weeks and months, often racing up and down the King's Road in various cars. Inevitably, their paths crossed again in the Cross Keys, but this time he was charmed personified. He held a real fascination for Diana, yet again she was swayed by his good looks, but he was intelligent and had a fascinating history. He was titled, his father having been a Canada leading air commander during the war. He and his brother John were born in Bermuda, and the parents were great socialites. By the age of just 19, Cabourn Waterfield had a colourful life. He was attempting to be an actor and oozed confidence and swagger. He was a man about town and seemingly knew everyone there was to know. He apparently sailed along on the crest of a wave of fortune. At 17, this was not Diana's first taste of what she thought was love, and she thought she knew what it was all about. She finished things with Newley, determined that Cabourn Waterfield was the one for her, but she would soon learn the subtle difference between love and infatuation. To be in love with someone and to love unselfishly with all soul are two different things, later said. Their early days together were a whirlwind of non-stop parties and nightclubs, all consuming fun and excitement. Even when Diamond City had to interfere with her active social life, despite her good intentions when she won the part. Diana, Michael, his friend Patrick, and Una, Diana's stand-up, would go straight out on the town after each day's filming had concluded. Diana would only be in bed for a couple of hours a night before being picked up to go on set at 6:30 a.m. But she was oblivious to it, happy that she was in love and she was making films. The obvious signs of overdoing it, however, were inevitably starting to show on her face as she staggered into the makeup chair. The hectic social life and heavy days of filming took their toll, and Diana collapsed on set. The studio sent her back to Swindon by car, wrapped in a blanket and obviously exhausted. Her parents had been rather worried about her anyway, because she'd barely been home at weekends. Moments their fears seemed entirely justified. Diana's mother Mary nursed her for 2 weeks. Cabourn Waterfield, who Diana had not really mentioned to her parents, rang practically every. Feeling rejuvenated after her imposed period of rest, Diana returned to London, only to discover that the lease on her flat had been terminated. Chelsea's party central was down. Hardly surprising, given the overindulgent behaviour of Diana and her Chelsea set friends. She quickly had to take what she referred to as a depressing flatlet in Jade. Apparently, you could only see the sky if you sat awkwardly with your head out the window, and it was so dark inside that the lights were left on permanently. It was hardly paradise, and it cost even more than the King's Road flat. But the farewell party at the old flat was a cracker. I hope you enjoyed that. Hopefully it gives a flavour of the book. I kind of felt that section covered the two main themes of the book, Diana falling in love with the wrong man and her film career. So that's why I chose it. So hopefully you enjoyed that little bit of a reading anyway. So yeah, we're going to move on now to the interview section, if that's okay.
That's grand. Thank you very much for sharing that reading with us, Anna. I think that was a really interesting excerpt to choose because it does seem to show how the various themes, recurring themes in her life are all intertwined. You know, you've got like glamour, excess, intense relationships, career struggles, and the whole lifestyle and the drama. So, and this is all when she was still in her teens. Quite incredible, really. And one word that you used a few times in the excerpt was the word fascination. And she was such a fascinating woman, wasn't she, Diana Dors? So I was wondering, could you tell how what your initial fascination was with her? When did you first become aware of her work?
Yeah, so I think like a lot of people of my generation, I first saw Diana Dors on TV. So in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, she was on TV a lot. You know, she was on buffers and chat shows. She was on game shows. She's always and she was always this wonderful, glamorous woman who just kind of appeared and lit up the screen. And I was always really fascinated by her. And as I got older and started watching films and kind of, I became aware of her as an actor and her work, and particularly her 1950s films, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with, about her. So when the opportunity came up to write the book, it was a book I wanted to read myself. I wanted to about her, a little bit more about her and her life and kind of how it had progressed, how her career had progressed, and, you know, kind of more about her as well. So yeah, obviously it's the book I wanted to read, so I had to write it, really.
Right. So can you tell us a little more about your experiences of actually researching and writing the book? I mean, were there any particular challenges or sort of highlights, happy moments during the whole journey?
Yeah, so I've never written a book before. You know, I've been writing about film for a couple of years. Even the concept of writing a book was just kind of, you know, alien to me. I had no idea where to think it. Yeah, the period of research and kind of that the reading, the kind of the finding out more about her and getting as much information as was amazing to me, because I wanted to write this book. I wanted to do her justice, but finding out more about her as I went along was an amazing experience. And absolutely, you know, kind of as I got to know her more and more, you know, it became, it kind of all fell into place really as I was kind of in that research. I had, you know, not long to write a book. You know, you're given a deadline, and you know, I immediately asked for an extra month, I think, when I first got the deadline through. I knew I had to start writing, and I had to start kind of putting down on paper the thoughts that were kind of, you know, floating around in my head. But as I started to do that and started the journey of writing and putting the story together, coronavirus hit, and, you know, the first lockdown happened, and all my plans for research visits and, you know, kind of all the bits and pieces, and kind of going to go to Swindon or stand outside the house she was born in and kind of get a real feel for her and her kind of, you know, background and her early life, go to London to do research at the it all kind of came crashing down. So a lot of it had to be curtailed, and I had to kind of find different ways of accessing sources and materials, which was interesting challenge to do that from home. I am eternally grateful to the Australian National Library, whose archive is entirely online and accessible from the UK. And yeah, suddenly I was having to find, you know, kind of different ways of accessing it, you know, primary sources to kind of, you know, kind of continue that research journey, but also to kind of, you know, put together the evidence as I was kind of going along and kind of make, you know, enrich the story, which, you know, I was kind of finding out from my reading. Luckily for me, Diana wrote a lot herself. So she wrote a lot of film articles, there's lots of interviews with her, but also she wrote herself and her own story. So she released a number of books during her lifetime, including 2 autobiographies, which were an amazing read. And if you can find them, please seek them out. They're absolutely wonderful, particularly Swinging Doors, which she wrote in the 60s, which is absolutely fascinating considering how young she was when she wrote that. There's so much to talk about already, you know, at such a young age. And yeah, it was wonderful to read her, hear her words as well, you know, interviews and other kind of, you know, ways of kind of accessing her thoughts and her feelings. Yeah, there was just so much to read, and yeah, it was, you know, a perilous journey at times, but a really enriching one, and so I absolutely thoroughly every minute of it, actually, of kind of research and writing the book.
That's fantastic. I mean, it wouldn't be worth it if you hadn't been an enjoyable experience for you. But I mean, congratulations about triumphing against adversity with having to be quite resourceful with, you know, as we all have done, physical limitations you've had imposed upon us. And it is great, as you say, that she was very sort of candid in her own words while she was here. So that's obviously been really useful to draw on, I guess. Cool.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So the story itself, I mean, sort of best way to do this is kind of travel through the timeline as you sort of portrayed it in the book. And if you look at her early life, I mean, obviously she came of age during a period of, you know, austerity post-war, but she was from quite an affluent background for the times, and that obviously allowed her a remarkable amount of freedom, as you've mentioned in the excerpt. She got to live life to the full with a Chelsea set as a young woman, pursue a drama career. Quite remarkable for any young woman, but I mean, especially in that time. So like the female perspective on that is quite interesting, in that from a young age, she was obviously quite keen to defy sort of convention and be very independent and strong-willed. Did that resonate with you when you were going through those years?
Yeah, it did. She, yeah, as you say, she came from a middle-class background, you know, London, middle-class upbringing. She was the only child of both mum and dad. Her mum doted on her, and, you know, from a young age, Diana wanted to be a star. She didn't necessarily want to be it wasn't an actor she wanted to be necessarily, she wanted to be a film, but I think she just found along the way that she was actually a really good actor and very talented, and she, yeah, that's what she wanted to do, and her mum was happy to kind of help and facilitate that. A dad not maybe, but he grudgingly, you know, let her move to London when she was 14. She kind of, yeah, started that journey at such a young age. To a young, you know, looking at the context of the time, I think it's a little bit different. You know, you leave school at 14, you know, at that stage, it was 1940. You know, she started into young womanhood, you know, in London, seeking out, you know, kind of school, learned the skills, and then kind of went into the studio system, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But yeah, she was living in London on her own during the week, going home at weekends on the train. She, you know, ration book given in to the, you know, the woman running the WMCA, and kind of, you know, she kind of lived on a small amount of money through the week, sent money home. But yeah, she was a resourceful young woman and determined. You know, she wanted to make it, and she, yeah, she wanted to start that journey as soon as she...
Thank you. Yeah, so in those early days, I mean, the book takes us through a lot of the early stage work. I mean, I was quite interested to learn that she actually won Actress of the Year from Theatre Magazine in 1950. So, you know, it's obviously, you know, as you say, you know, she had talent as well as the ambition, and that obviously drew her to the Rank Studios, enrolled in what they call their charm school. I don't know if it's worth maybe breaking that down for the benefit of people who might not be so familiar with the studio system as it was back in the day, because I mean, it was very much modeled along the Hollywood system, I guess, where each studio had a certain identity, and you were basically on a wage, and you were just contracted by a studio and took whatever work was offered. It wasn't like you didn't have your artistic principles. And you mentioned, you know, that meant that, you know, her early film career was could be a bit patchy and unpredictable at times. So and you mentioned the very candid interview she gave with Picture Goer, where she was really frustrated by the kind of limitations of the kind of old school mentality of the charm school. So that's quite an important, quite a significant chapter in sort of establishing herself, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, she got to attend the Rank Charm School, which sounds incredibly glamorous, but actually was in a drafty church hall in London, and kind of, yeah, a bit of a production line for young starlets who kind of came and went very quickly. And yeah, you know, they learn some of the basics in terms of acting and skills, I guess. I think one of the things was learning how to die from strychnine poisoning as opposed to something else, and kind of, the right way to fall when you get shot. I don't know. The little bits and pieces, a bit of deportment here and there, how to kind of conduct yourselves as a star. It was all a bit, a bit rough around the edges, I think, and kind of, like you say, wanting to emulate the Hollywood studio system, but maybe not quite. Maybe doing it with a bit of a British touch, kind of, roughness. But it did, produce a long line of stars, and they were all under contract to rank, and they basically, like you say, appeared in what they were told to appear in. It did give, kind of Diana the chance to really hone her craft. She was appearing on screen from a really young age. She was appearing in films from 1948. She's incredibly young. Often playing slightly older. She looked older for her age, and I think a lot of her early roles she's playing much older characters than her age. But she was great. I'm biased. She's like 8 now, and I think she's wonderful. But even from her earliest roles, you could see the talent that she had as an actor, and a real kind of charm to the way she presented. She knew the camera, and she knew how to use it, and she knew to conduct herself on screen. And I think she had something else that maybe other young stars, in terms of longevity, and being able to kind of battle through that kind of studio system, and kind of come out the other side, really.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, let's talk just for a second about some of those films, because there is some quite remarkable ones that have obviously endured as classics of their time. Like one of her more youthful roles, which was supporting actors in a film called Boy, a Girl and a Bike, filmed around the Yorkshire Dales. And a couple of years later, a personal favourite of mine was Kid for Two Farthings. And they're really interesting because the former, obviously, it's very much that bucolic post-war England. And Kid for Two Farthings, it's kind of a snapshot of the Jewish West East End, the markets, and the sort of culture, and it's like those games. It's like the Gainsborough and the Archer films. They sort of capture an England that would be unrecognisable, 10 years later with the 60s and everything. And then, of course, Yield to the Night was obviously a game changer. So, which of those films were the ones that you've enjoyed the most, or your personal favourites from that period?
I mean, her career, she was with Rank, with the Charm School, and had a Rank contract, from an early age. And some of her earlier films, I really like Dance Hall, which is 1950. And she was kind of fourth on the bill in terms of a group of 4 female friends. Her part was a little bit smaller than some of the others, but I think she was amazing in that. She really kind of brought and the charm to that role, and really kind of demonstrated, kind of some of the essence of what she brings to the screen later on. I do quite like A Boy Like. It's quite a straightforward film in terms of its narrative and the way it's presented. But it's really sweet, and it's kind of a good example of films from that period, kind of late 40s, early 50s, which she was appearing in that those very early stages. Her situation with the Charm School, she left the Charm School. She then had a Rank studio contract as well, so she made films for them, but she was also, as other actors were, loaned out to other film production companies as well. If they needed someone, off you'd go and film for someone else. And so she did. She was she was appearing in such a lot. When I was looking at kind of bringing together filmography, it took me ages, because she appeared in so many things. But she started in the 50s to kind of start to get, I guess, typecast in certain roles as kind of the cheeky, kind of sexy one, the kind of the femme fatale type. My favorite period of her work, I mean, I love Yield to the Night. I mean, I think it goes without saying that it's an amazing film, and anyone who knows British film of of that period knows it's worth as a film. And she gives a wonderful performance, and a lot's talked about of that film. But the period after that, when it should have been the making of her, that film, she got critical acclaim, it won awards. It should have been the absolute making of her. It went to Cannes. It should have been the pinnacle and the start of something amazing, and it wasn't. And just afterwards, she started to kind of appear again in some what I guess I'd call kind of northern gritty noir, British noir films, which actually are amongst my favourites. So I really like Tread Softly Stranger, which is 1957. I think she's just this amazing, beautiful woman who somehow turns up in this northern industrial city. You know, she's called Calico and kind of works as a nightclub hostess, lives in a bedsit. You know, it's kind of, it's a weird kind of juxtaposition, you know, of kind of American noir values, grittiness and kind of sensibilities. I really like The Long Haul as well, which, you know, is a bit of a kind of some questionable is in that film, but I think she's amazing in it. Again, playing this glamorous woman who somehow ends up, you know, on the kind of lorry haul between Liverpool and Glasgow. You know, it seems unfeasible, some of the storylines, but yeah, she pulls it off, I think, amazingly well. They're actually kind of some of my favourite performances. She's absolutely, resolutely herself in those roles. I can't imagine anyone else giving the same performance as she did and taking that kind of material and really running with it and kind of making it her own.
Yeah. It's almost like she was parachuted into like a kitchen sink sort of genre almost, isn't it? You know,
Yeah,
but like
maybe.
weird juxtaposition. But then, as you sort of mentioned, at Yield Tonight, I mean, really should have been taken her out of what she called being a ranks, quote, stock bad girl, unquote. And of course, she tried what you know, it's the same old story. You know, you try to break America, and as the book goes into quite a lot of detail, that really didn't happen. It sort of ended quite pretty badly all round, and she, you know, for contractual and personal reasons and business reasons relating to the first husband. So that was kind of that's your kind of midpoint crisis in the story arc, I suppose, at this point in time. Did you want to sort of go further on that period, on that sort of particular chapter of her life?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is really interesting because she should. It was a natural progression for her to go to Hollywood. So it was late 50s. So she was married to her first husband, Dennis Hamilton, at that stage, who was quite influential in her career. And a lot is talked about in the book about him and kind of the interaction between them and him in terms of his influence. In Hollywood, you know, she got a Hollywood contract. She went out to Hollywood. It was supposed to be, you know, the start of something amazing. It wasn't, and I won't spoil it for people who don't know the story of how that kind of ended up. But it did work out. You know, it didn't work out the way that she wanted. You know, in part due to Dennis Hamilton. And it goes without saying, I'm not a big fan of his. I think anyone who's done any kind of reading around her Diana Dors story, he's going to come out as the baddie, I think, in his eyes. Actually, herself, in terms of her own, I guess, behaviours and the way that she handled that time, you know, I think she could have done things a little bit better, you know, in terms of how she handled you know, the kind of the film and some of the films that she did out there, and it, you know, basically imploded back to Britain. Yeah, it kind of, what should have been the start something fizzled out, and she had to kind of start again. And I think, you know, yes, it's such a shame that didn't work out for her, and it when it should have done. But equally, it shows the strength of her as a person, of how she handled that situation, dusted herself down and started again. And you see that in the book and through her journey, you know, through life, is that she faces these, and it might not work out the way she wants, but she you know, she tries again. She doesn't give up, and she keeps working, and she maybe isn't doing what she wanted to do. And through the 60s, you know, it's an interesting period as she kind of progresses through that, and how she diversifies her career and takes on different things and just kind of gives stuff a go. But she doesn't stop working, and she doesn't stop trying, you know. And it's kind of it's testament, I think, to her strength as a woman and as a person, of how she just keeps going. I don't think I could have done that, you know.
Like literally, like quite to the end, wasn't it? Really, I mean, she was always a presence on television, even when she segued from films. But like, I mean, there's obviously always been quite sort of salacious aspects about her public image, and that's not, you know, it's one of those sort of interesting areas where it's like a lot of it does kind of go to the fact that there was very little safeguarding for a woman in the industry back then, but also, as you say yourself, she had to do a lot of things to get by, and part of that was, I guess, kind of cashing in on her notoriety. She was obviously very aware of the marketability of herself as a sex symbol, and she said her own words that this is, you know, this isn't going to last forever. I may as well make the most of it, you know, whilst I've got it. And she was quite kind of savvy in a way that is more, was obviously not very looked down as seen quite vulgar back then, but now it's very sort of common in the sense that the reality age, people are their own brand, and they're quite savvy, they're quite it's, you know, it's almost kind of empowering. It's not empowering, but I mean sort of the commodification kind of a public image, kind of trying to take ownership of it. So how did you kind of approach that whole aspect of Diana Dors persona? Because at times it would overshadow her work, which is a shame, but it obviously, you know, gave her a kind of enduring kind of imprint on the landscape.
So yeah, as you say, she really was the first, or one of the first celebrities, you know, in Britain. You mentioned, you know, the kind of the tabloid aspect, and you know, I mentioned earlier about Dennis Hamilton and his kind of control or seeming control over Diana's image of career. You know, he maybe pushed her into a lot of things that, you know, she might not have chosen to do herself, but equally, I think, you know, she kind of embraced that. You know, as a way of kind of being, standing out and being something different. You know, she used that relationship with the press in a way, and it was the first, you know, kind of evidence of that, really, particularly in Britain. And she sold a story to the News of the World in 1960. Which is the first time I think anyone had done that, you know, and it was a rather salacious story. She needed the money, basically. She got a lot of money from them. She wasn't in the best financial situations. I think that's something that she skirted over a lot herself, you know, when she's writing about her own life, was the state of her finances. But yeah, she sold a story. It was serialized over a few Sundays. This big scandal about it, you know, it was talked about in Parliament. You know, she was called all sorts by people, you know, a bishop got involved, and you know, kind of like, it was a scandalous woman. And it's kind of like, yeah, she certainly got what she wanted. She certainly got the attention. She also got the, you know, kind of I guess the result for her, when, you know, when her career was a little bit up and down, but equally, you know, she sometimes she made the I think poor choices along the way, particularly with her work and some of her film choices, the things that she did in her life. And I think she didn't, you know, I didn't want to skirt over that stuff in the book. I don't dwell on it either. You know, that was intention with writing this book, wasn't to kind of replicate some of the other accounts of her that have come out over the years, which do focus on the scandalous, the parties that her and Dennis Hamilton used to have, you know, some of the kind of the more questionable aspects of her personal life. I didn't want to ignore it, obviously, because it's a big part of her, but I didn't want that to be the focus of her journey. I wanted to bring, you know, a social history aspect to her journey, you know, because I think she represents the times and the changing times and that period, you know, post-war period through the 60s and, you know, into the 70s. Kind of her journey kind of replicates the journey that a lot of people went on in that time. And I think, you know, kind of pick apart, you know, some of the aspects upon, you know, all the stuff that's been written before, you know, kind of pull that apart and piece it back to bed again, and kind of look at it maybe from a slightly different perspective. But equally, you can't ignore, you know, of her and her life. It's very much a part of her, and, you know, what made her unique.
And she really reinvented herself to just keep going, didn't she? I mean, and sort of moving towards, you know, the last couple of years of her life, which is when people in my generation remember her from things like The Worm That Turned Into Two Ronnies, doing the TVN weigh-ins, covered in all her bling, and obviously, you know, the ultimate fairy godmother, the Adamant video. I mean, she was a camp icon and a real cult figure towards the end. It's like the fact that we're still talking about her now is definitely testament to the lasting influence. And this book is obviously part of that kind of reevaluation. So what do you, like, one last question I'd like to ask, just to kind of tie everything up in a bow, is it had she not been had she not obviously lost had she not obviously passed away at the relatively young age that she did in her early 50s, what sort of work do you think she might have gone on to do? I mean, would you have seen her maybe as a kind of continuing with sort of more drama, like, because she did things like the Sweeney and stuff, where would you have maybe seen her in the 80s or 90s as a mature performer?
Yeah, so as you've mentioned there, she really diversified her career, particularly kind of from the 70s and into the 80s. And she took on a lot more TV work. I think when she was able to kind of shed that that glamorous image that she was so associated with her, and it was able to embrace character roles and really kind of start to look at her as herself as an actor. She absolutely relished that, and I think she more of that, I think. Given the 70s was a difficult period for anyone to be an actor in Britain, I think she weathered it quite well. And I think going into TV and doing a lot of TV work, as you mentioned, was really kind of strengthened her acting career. She did some really interesting stuff, and I think she would have continued to do that. As you say, she died in 1984 at the very young age of 52. Which is just absolutely tragic. And she would have gone on to do, I think, so much more. I was talking to someone the other day about, some similar kind of question about where would I have seen her. And I think TV drama in the 90s was pretty strong, and I think I would have seen her in a strong TV role, a continuing drama, a Linda LaPlante, for example, or something like that, like really showing what she could do as an actor. As a strong actor, she was strong dramatically, but equally she was really good at comedy. People forget she, as a performer, she did comedy, she did cabaret, she did all sang, she did a one comic turn. She's very witty, she's very intelligent, and I think she could turn her hand to a lot of things. You could see in the Diana that we from our generation remember of being on TV. She was funny and really came alive in front of the audience. And I think, dramatically she would have really kind of flown, I think. But also I could have seen her doing comedy as well, and because she knew how to take the mickey out of herself as well. She knew herself very well.
Absolutely. I mean, as you said, they're getting a completely fascinating woman, and I really hope that people will read and enjoy your book and discover or rediscover, get insight into who she was as a woman, and also, as you say, as a professional. So well done on this achievement, and thanks for talking it through with us. I guess we're going to have to hand back to Jack now to lead us into the second half of the event. That's all good.
Yeah, of course.
This is where I have to do a song.
Yeah, this is where you do the song. I like how you're being all coy, like, is this where I have to do the song? As if you haven't been saying it was birth. Don't forget the song bit.
I have to be on my best behaviour. My mum's watching, so.
Yeah, we've had a comment from a proud dad as well, which I'm guessing it's your dad. It could be Jay's dad, actually. But
I know, Coco.
But yeah, that was such a great chat to listen to, and so many comments in the chat box here. So thanks a lot to everybody who's watching as well. So I'm just gonna dive into a couple of the questions, if that's all right. And if anybody has, we've already got a few questions, but if anybody has anything else, feel free to pop it in the chat box. So I'm going to start with Leslie's question, which is, Anna, what fact about Diana surprised you the most, and why do you think Diana is still loved and remembered today?
Wow. Okay, so I'm going to start with the second bit of the question, if that's okay. I think she was incredibly real as a person. I think what you see was what you got, or the other way around. She, from doing the research and kind of speaking to people who knew her and hearing stories about her, she really was the person that kind of comes across, particularly, in those later years when she really kind of relaxed to kind of show who she was. She, I think she was very open and pretty honest. There were some things meant so much on, but kind of what you saw is what you got, and she kind of was very relatable. I think that's one of the things. Talking, everyone loved her, men, women, you know, they all adored her for different reasons. And I think she was very relatable, very down to earth, actually. And yeah, I think that's what made her unique. You know, she was a star, she's beautiful and glamorous, but also tangible. I think that's kind of what really kind of came across with her. And yeah, that from hearing stories, particularly after I'd written the book and people started to hear it, that I'd done it, I heard other stories as well from people who knew her, and that was wonderful. You know, people or who met at a garden party, or, you know, kind of in the street or whatever, in the post office, whatever, you know, saying she was lovely, she was really nice to me, she was really nice to my you know, she just it was wonderful to hear that. It was a real relief, because when I was building this picture of her as I wrote the book, you know, it was wonderful to hear the feeling that I had about her was justified, and that was kind of on the right track. And hopefully that comes across in the book, that I wanted to capture that spirit of her. In terms of surprises, I don't want to say I found out, but it was one related to her love life. She had a number of husbands and lovers and kind of boyfriends and relationships. One in particular that I was like, wow, I didn't know that. And yeah, that was a big thing for me. I learned so much about her. She became my best mate, in basically with me and my husband and my daughter. You know, she became part of the family as, you know, the journey of writing the book came about. And I would have loved to have gone out for a drink with her and heard her story. I think, you know, some of the career choices were interesting. The cabaret, the working men's circuit that she did, some of her early TV shows. One of my favourites was Pause for Dors, which was a pet chat show that she did a pilot of. Just the ideas and the kind of just continuing to kind of keep, you know, coming up with this stuff was wonderful. And it's stuff like that really that I found out along the way that I absolutely, yeah, really enjoyed finding out more about her as I went along.
Pause for Dors is amazing.
Yeah. I wish that had been, you know, made.
An Alan Partridge title, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was, it's people talking about, it's no spoiler, you know, it's like, it's in the book, but yeah, she did a chat show where she talked to people about their pets, not to the actual pets, which is a shame.
Brilliant. And so a question from Karen here, which you kind of, you chatted about there, about talking to people who talked to Diana. So Karen's question is, did you manage to contact Diana Dors' surviving family and friends?
So no, it was obviously this is an unauthorized biography of her, as many of them through the years have been, and I didn't proactively seek out her family and friends when writing the book, particularly family. I think, you know, it's a tricky situation, you know, as a writer of a biography, you know, the nuances and differences in terms of kind of that journey, but equally, obviously, I wanted to make sure that there was nothing in this book that they would hopefully object, kind of, you know, wanted to give a true and reflective account of Diana's life. And as I say, I wasn't going for the salacious, and I wasn't going for that aspect of things anyway. So hopefully they would, you know, want to read and kind of get something from. I did speak to friends. I spoke to people who'd worked with her, and as I say, people from even since writing the book to say that they knew her and kind of privately messaged me to kind of talk about her, and that's been wonderful actually. To speak to people who knew her really well, and kind of, again, as I said, understand that I was on the right track in terms of her as a person, and the light she saw the party, you know, that really comes across in the book. But equally, she loved her family, and her friend was sounded like a wonderful company, and yeah, that it was lovely to hear that from people who really knew her.
Yeah.
I was going to say, there's a lovely little comment from Esther in the chat. I don't know if you want to read that one out. It's nice.
Go.
So Esther A writes, Anna, my late mum was friends with Diana. They used to go drinking in a club in Kensington, which I believe was called the Connoisseur Club, and it was full of actors. She was always asking everyone for cigarettes. That's lovely. Well, I hope no matter how famous
that's great.
Always be catching cigarettes. That's wonderful. Thanks.
I loved it.
That's wonderful.
Sean says as well that Jar Jar Gabor was a guest on Pause for Doors. This just
that's right.
That's definitely what I'm doing tonight. It's just Googling Pause for Doors.
Yeah.
So I've got a question from Katrina, who says, were there any gaps in her story or mysteries that you wish you'd been able to resolve? And did your view of Diana change over the writing and researching of this.
Okay. Hi, Katrina. I've known Katrina a really long time. Don't turn her mic on, she might tell you some terrible things. There were actually some gaps, I think. As I say, she wrote a lot about her life, but towards the kind of middle to end of her journey, there were kind of things I would have wanted to find out more about, and I couldn't find that information, or she maybe kept her cards closer to her chest of that, particularly when it came to kind of her later relationship, kind of her marriage, to Alan Lake. She was obviously very happy with him, and their relationship seemed a very strong one. Her second Dors biography, which came out in 1980, I think, was a bit kind of, didn't talk about that period as much, and there wasn't as much. She had a family, and she had a right to a private life. She didn't have to shout everything to the world, and that's absolutely, I completely understand that. But there were periods where things went quiet, and it was hard to kind of find that extra bit of information kind of along the way. It would have been nice to have been able to ask her what happened there, Dinah, tell us more.
I've just got a question here from Jan, who asks, did you enjoy the writing process of the book, and have you any other books that you're currently working on or in the pipeline?
I did enjoy it. It was a real adventure. I think there's a lot I learned from that journey as a writer, and kind of now I know kind of more what I'm doing. I had to learn along the way, and it was really hard to understand what I had to do. I kind of I had to find that information out and kind of make it up as I went along a little bit. But actually I don't see that as a bad thing. I think it was a real kind of rites of passage for me as a writer, and I did enjoy it. There were times when it was really tough. I mean, I've got a day job, I've got a family, kind of having to write while I'm doing my daughter's tea, or kind of finding an hour on weekends. I'm not one of these people who could go to a writing retreat and write 10,000 words and stare out a window at a beautiful scene. I had to do it at the dinner table and kind of just get on with it. And I think once I embraced that was the way it was going to be, I think I relaxed into it a little bit more and didn't worry about it, and I just got it done. I did enjoy it. It was hard, but I did enjoy it, and I'm incredibly proud of the book and what I managed to achieve, considering the situation I was in, kind of going into that, and the experience of lockdown, and kind of thinking, well, can I even do this? Well, how can I even achieve this during that situation? I did achieve it, and I'm incredibly proud of that, and I'm hoping that people enjoy the book. And that this, obviously for myself, this was something I wanted to do, but I wrote it for people to read, and I want people to read it and enjoy it, and hopefully that'll be the case. And if I achieve that, if people enjoy it and want to find out more about Dinah Dors and her work as a result, then I've kind of achieved what I wanted to achieve, really.
Yeah, nice. I mean, I think it's incredible that you've managed to do a kind of like a prolonged piece of thoughtful work amongst this. Like even just reading, like at times I found like really difficult. I was listening to a podcast from the beginning of the pandemic where someone was trying to motivate people by saying that Isaac Newton did some of his best work during a quarantine, and what Shakespeare had once done. And I was like, this is bonkers. This is not good for anybody's health. So it's amazing that you managed to do that. I've just got a couple more questions, and then I guess we're starting to kind of wrap up now. If anybody has anything else, pop it in the chat, but we've probably got enough here. So from Nicola Brentnell, Nicola says, my favourite performance was Dinah in an episode from the Sweeney. It was comedy gold. I'd love to hear from Anna on Diana and comedy. That's good fist bump in there by Nicola.
Yeah, thank you, Nicola. Lovely to see you on the call. Yeah, hi. She had wonderful comic timing, and from an early age, from an early age and an early part of her career, actually, that was evident. I think people forget that, where younger stars, weren't necessarily all rounders, but some, to have that, I think, in her armory was an amazing thing. She did one of the earliest comedy shows on TV. She appeared in that. She did comic turns on radio. She did all sorts of bits and pieces. Her comic timing in her films as well. One of the things about 50s British films, and I don't want to be going on about British films from the 50s too much, I'll be here all night, but the comedy value of some of them is just wonderful. And I think people dismiss them sometimes as a little bit kind of I don't know, is it a twee maybe, kind of like, but actually there's some wonderful stuff in there. And she had that ability to turn on a little bit of a look to her, or a kind of a turn of the eyebrow, and she kind of she was able to convey what the audience were thinking. She was cheeky with the camera in her performances. She was actor for that period in British film. She wasn't wooden like a lot of the actors kind of came across. She was very full of life, and I think new comedy, and I think you can see that in her films and in her career. And you're right, the 70s in particular gave her the freedom to and kind of do more of that, and we see that through the 70s. We see that into the 80s as well. We mentioned earlier the two Ronnies, the Worm That Turned sketch, which for younger viewers might remember it. For people kind of 40 plus, you would have watched it on TV with your family, and seen her very comic turn in that. She absolutely herself, she took the mickey out of herself, and I think she just enjoyed some of those performances, and you can really see that it kind of comes across on screen. She absolutely embraced comedy as part of her armory, and I would love people to think about that and kind of maybe seek out some of those performances as well.
Oh, great. And we've just got this question from Mehdi, who asks, I guess, how was Diana Dors considered by her peers, and like what was the perception amongst other actors?
Yeah, don't get me started on that conversation. I had that conversation on Twitter with someone. I think it's really interesting actually that I couldn't find that many sources of information about how people viewed her, other than obviously people who knew her loved her, and loved working with her. She, on the other hand, was very overt in giving her opinion on other actors. In some of her books that she released in the kind of 60s and 70s, certainly gave her opinion. When she didn't like someone about it, she didn't hold back. But equally, when she really loved somebody and admired somebody, she would have was happy to kind of say, in terms of the other female actors that she admired and performers, and she would talk about that. And it's interesting. I did obviously a lot of reading and a lot of research for the book. There was so much more I could have done to seek out those opinions from maybe other people around the time. And I think looking back, it's something I'd like to do now, kind of find out more actually about perceptions of her peers, of her, those that knew her, loved her. It'd be interesting to see actually some more kind of views of some of the fellow actors, from the time. It would be interesting to kind of see if that view is shared by them as well, the people who worked with her.
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot, Anna. So I've got a couple of questions really that are just about writing and your writing that's coming up, and somebody just asking for some advice really. So Lucy says, what would be your number one recommendation to somebody thinking of putting pen to paper but not knowing about how to start the process? And then Kevin just asks what you write about next. And I think unless Jay or anybody else has any last minute kind of like things, I think that could probably be the last questions. So what advice would you give to anybody who's not yet started writing? What will you be writing about next? When will we get to do this again with another Anna book?
Another Anna book. Well, with the writing aspect, so obviously this was a non-fiction book, and I now know what to do. I didn't when I started. I like anything in my life, I responded to a tweet and I got the opportunity, and that's probably how I started my film writing career 2 years ago as well. Actually, was responding to a tweet from someone saying, I'm looking for someone to write for my new magazine, you know, do you want, are you interested, you know, if people are interested, get in touch. And I did. And yeah, we haven't got time to talk about that, as I had suddenly started writing at the age of 40 something. But yeah, in terms of a non-fiction book, there is a process, and it's my field in finding out the information and putting it together. But basically, if you're writing a non-fiction book, you contact a publisher, write a proposal of what you want to write, send it to them, and they will tell you whether they're interested or not. And you might talk about it and kind of refine it, which is what I did, you know, kind of in terms of the idea. And they will come back to you, and you would agree to, and, you know, kind of start that process. If it's fiction, it's entirely different. So as far as I'm aware, I'm not a fiction writer, but from people I know who are, a different process. Essentially, you write a whole book and send it off, and that you either get accepted or rejected. So for me, non-fiction is the way to go, because I haven't got time about writing a book and then getting it rejected. I'm either doing this book or I'm not. So I know it's to non-fiction than I am to fiction. So yeah, but and this kind of segues into the other question about, you know, what we're doing next. And it's an interesting, you know, kind of journey, because I've written one book. You would think it opens up doors to write more books on, hey, you know, everyone wants to write me a book. That's not the situation. I, like anybody else, need to think about what it is I want to write, what I can offer, you know, what is it that I can bring to a subject, and you know, why am I the person to write that book? And I think, you know, that answers both questions. And I'm looking for my next opportunity. I do want to write something again, but it has to be the right thing for me to write. I need to be able to bring something of value to that process, you know, and kind of something I want to write, and that, you know, think I'm the right person to do so. And also find a publisher who wants to publish that idea and kind of go with me. It's not straightforward from one book to the next, and I'm finding that out. You know, it's I'm enjoying the moment with this one. I'm really enjoying. A year ago, it's wonderful to be talking about it again with people and kind of revisiting her and seeing her again. Yeah, to start that journey again with someone else, it needs to be the right subject. I have some ideas, I have loads of ideas, but whether they're the right ones and whether they're ones that someone wants to publish, you know, are two different things. And as I say, I want it to be there for me, because it is tough, it's really hard, and you know, it needs to work. And I need to be sure that you know, it's something that I can write. Plenty of interesting subjects out there, strong female voices, you know, the actors, you know, film producers and writers as well. You know, kind of, I want to kind of tell their stories. I want it to be an interesting story. So I'm still seeking out the next opportunity.
Thanks, Anna. And yeah, I think just on behalf of everybody, just to say thanks for writing this and for tonight. It's been just such a lovely atmosphere, and thanks to you, Jay, as well, and everybody in the audience. Like, yeah, and everybody for participating so much as well in the chat box, sending questions. And my sense is a lot of love for you from everybody here, and yeah, people really appreciating that you've written this book. If anybody hasn't ordered it yet, the link is there. And I'll maybe send it out afterwards as well. And if anybody fancies sharing this on Twitter and wherever you can share that this has happened. And I also think we should appreciate Carly having not just to get your cat on camera, but having the cat mentioned in your name as well. So I've appreciated that the whole chat. So
yeah, that's wonderful.
All right. Well, yeah, Anna, is there anything else you'd like to say?
Yeah, I just want to say, you know, echo that and say thank you to everybody for all your support and love, and kind of wonderful, you know, the support of having people, you know, friends and family, but also people, and kind of, you know, everything. It's just been amazing. And, you know, I couldn't have done it without that support. You know, it's been a real journey. Anyone who's known me for the last couple of years will know that. And it's lovely to have so many people on the call today who, you know, want to kind of celebrate that. And yeah, it's great. I've loved it tonight. I've really appreciated it.
Yeah, great. Jay, anything before we wrap up?
No, just thanks for everyone for spending an hour with us. It's been really great to see all the comments popping up in the sidebar, everyone engaging with a subject we obviously all love, because that's why we're here, and how Anna has done it justice through the medium of biography. And we should do this every week, I think.
Well, if
Yeah.
only somebody had a webzine. If only somebody had a webzine that we could do it from. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. Thanks a lot again, everybody, and Anna, and yeah, have a great rest of your evening. See you all soon.